The screaming started at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, when 312 people dropped their shopping bags and ran for their lives. Children's birthday cake scattered across the food court tiles. Elderly shoppers stumbled and fell as the stampede surged toward the exits. Emergency alarms shrieked through Westfield Shopping Center while parents frantically searched for their children in the chaos. Nobody knew why they were running. They only knew they had to run. The police loudspeaker crackled with urgent commands. Everyone evacuate immediately. Leave all bags and packages. Move to the parking lot. Glass shattered somewhere near the department store entrance. A woman's voice rose above the mayhem, hysterical and raw. "Where's my baby? Has anyone seen my baby?" In the center of the food court, abandoned and forgotten, sat a small table decorated with purple streamers and a half-eaten birthday cake. 16 candles still flickered in the artificial mall lighting, waiting for a wish that would never come. 20 minutes earlier, Emma Rodriguez had been the happiest 15-year-old in the world. Her cerebral palsy made walking difficult, but today, nothing could dampen her spirits. Her best friends Mia and Josh flanked her wheelchair as they navigated through the Saturday afternoon crowd toward the food court. The mall buzzed with typical weekend energy families with strollers. Teenagers clustered around phone charging stations. Elderly couples window shopping at a leisurely pace. "I can't believe you actually convinced your mom to let us have your party here," Mia laughed, adjusting the purple balloon tied to Emma's wheelchair. "She was so worried about the noise levels." Emma's speech device, mounted on her wheelchair's armrest, spoke in its carefully programmed voice. "Mom finally realized I'm not made of glass. Besides, the food court has the best acoustics for my communication device." Josh carried the birthday cake box with exaggerated care. 16 candles for 16 years of putting up with our nonsense. You deserve a medal, Em." They claimed a round table near the center of the food court, close to the fountains where the ambient noise wouldn't interfere with Emma's device. Mia produced party supplies from her backpack, while Josh carefully arranged the purple and silver decorations. Emma watched with bright eyes, occasionally directing their efforts through her communication tablet. The food court thrummed with typical Saturday activity. Families occupied nearby tables, their conversations blending into a comfortable background hum. The smell of pizza, Chinese food, and cinnamon rolls created a familiar mall atmosphere. Emma's communication device beeped softly as she typed her responses to her friends' jokes and stories. 3 tables away, Karen Whitfield sat alone with her organic salad and bottled water, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping impatiently on her phone screen. At 42, she maintained an appearance of rigid perfection, not a blonde hair out of place. Designer clothes, wrinkle-free, despite the afternoon heat. Her face carried the permanent expression of someone perpetually dissatisfied with the world around her. Karen's eyes narrowed as she observed the birthday celebration. The electronic beeping from Emma's communication device created a steady rhythm that pierced through the general food court noise. Each beep seemed to intensify Karen's irritation. She shifted in her chair, shooting pointed glances toward the teenagers' table. "Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday to you!" Mia and Josh sang, as Emma grinned widely. The cake, a beautiful purple creation with silver stars, sat before her like a small miracle. Emma's device spoke for her. "Make a wish. Make a wish." The electronic voice carried clearly across the food court. Several nearby families smiled and watched the celebration with warm approval. A little girl at the next table clapped her hands excitedly. "Mommy, look, she has a robot voice." But Karen's reaction was entirely different. The combination of the electronic beeps, the synthetic voice, and what she perceived as disruptive noise levels triggered something dark in her personality. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile floor with a harsh screech. Emma was leaning forward to blow out her candles when Karen's shadow fell across their table. "Excuse me?" Karen's voice cut through their celebration like a blade. "That device is making some very strange noises. What exactly is that thing?" Mia looked up, confused. "It's her communication device. She uses it to talk." "Talk?" Karen's voice dripped with skepticism. "It sounds like some kind of electronic equipment. What's she really doing with that thing?" Josh stood up, his teenage protective instincts kicking in. "She's celebrating her birthday. Maybe you could give us some space." Emma's fingers moved across her device's screen, formulating a response. The familiar beeping pattern emerged as she typed. Karen's face contorted with what looked like genuine fear. "That beeping. What is that it sounds like? Like some kind of timer or something." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Nearby families had begun to notice the confrontation. A mother pulled her young children closer. An elderly man stopped mid-bite of his sandwich and stared. "Timer for what?" Mia demanded, her voice rising with indignation. Karen's mind had already constructed an elaborate narrative. The electronic device, the strange beeping patterns, the way the disabled girl's friends seemed so protective, it all fit together into a conspiracy that existed only in her paranoid imagination. "I don't know what you people are planning, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is normal." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Her thumb hovered over the emergency call button as her breathing became rapid and shallow. The birthday cake candles continued flickering, innocent and cheerful, completely unaware of the darkness about to engulf them. "Ma'am, please calm down," Josh said, his voice taking on the careful tone people use with unstable individuals. "Emma has cerebral palsy. She uses that device to communicate. We're just having a birthday party." But Karen was beyond reason. In her mind, the electronic beeping had transformed into something sinister. The synthetic voice became threatening. The protective behavior of the friends looked like accomplices covering for criminal activity. She pressed the emergency call button. 911, what's your emergency?" Karen's voice dropped to a terrified whisper, deliberately designed to sound like someone hiding from imminent danger. "I'm at Westfield Shopping Center in the food court. There's a girl here with some kind of electronic device that's making timing sounds. She keeps pressing buttons, and it beeps like a countdown. Her friends are acting really suspicious, and they won't let anyone get close to her. I think she might have a bomb." The 911 operator's training kicked in immediately. Potential terrorist threats triggered specific protocols that moved at lightning speed. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm and get to a safe distance. We're dispatching units immediately. Can you describe the suspects?" "The girl is in a wheelchair, maybe 15 or 16. Hispanic, I think. She has some kind of electronic control panel on her chair. 2 other teenagers with her, acting like bodyguards. They're at table 7 in the center of the food court." Karen provided detailed descriptions while watching Emma's table with malicious satisfaction. She painted a picture of suspicious behavior, coded language, and threatening gestures that existed nowhere but in her twisted interpretation of a birthday celebration. Within 90 seconds, the emergency response machinery was in motion. The mall's security office received the alert first. Director James Peterson, a former police officer with 20 years of experience, felt his stomach drop as he listened to the dispatcher's brief. Possible IED situation in food court. Multiple suspects. Female juvenile in wheelchair with electronic device showing timer-like behavior. Peterson immediately activated the mall's emergency lockdown protocol. while simultaneously dispatching his security team. His hands moved across multiple screens, pulling up security camera feeds from the food court. What he saw made him pause a normal birthday party with teenagers and cake. But protocol was protocol, and a bomb threat demanded immediate action regardless of appearances. The first police units arrived within 4 minutes. Officers Chen and Rodriguez entered through the south entrance, their hands resting on their weapons, but not yet drawn. They'd received the same brief potential IED. Multiple suspects. Exercise extreme caution. As they approached the food court, they could see the scene the 911 caller had described. A teenage girl in a wheelchair sat at a decorated table with 2 friends. An electronic device mounted on her wheelchair emitted occasional beeping sounds. To untrained eyes focused on finding threats, it could appear suspicious. Officer Chen spoke into his radio. "Control, we have visual on the suspects. Requesting bomb squad and tactical support. Initiating civilian evacuation." The response escalated with mechanical precision. Within minutes, additional patrol units surrounded the mall. The bomb squad received their alert and began mobilizing from across the city. SWAT was put on standby. The local FBI field office was notified of a potential domestic terrorism incident. Emma was in the middle of blowing out her candles when the first police officers approached their table. She looked up with innocent confusion as the uniformed men positioned themselves strategically around the food court. Other diners began noticing the police presence, and conversations gradually died. "Miss, I need you to slowly move away from that device and put your hands where I can see them," Officer Chen announced in a commanding voice that carried across the suddenly quiet food court. Emma's eyes widened with terror. Her communication device lay silent on her wheelchair's armrest, suddenly seeming foreign and threatening under the officer's intense scrutiny. She tried to raise her hands, but her cerebral palsy made the movement awkward and incomplete. "She can't move her hands normally," Mia shouted, jumping to her feet. "She has cerebral palsy. That's her communication device." "Step away from the suspect immediately," Officer Rodriguez commanded, his weapon now partially drawn. "Everyone move back." The word suspect hit Emma like a physical blow. Her birthday celebration had transformed into a nightmare in seconds. Tears began streaming down her face as she tried to understand what was happening. Her fingers instinctively moved toward her communication device to ask for help, but the motion caused both officers to tense visibly. "Don't touch that device," Officer Chen shouted. "Keep your hands visible." Josh stepped protectively in front of Emma's wheelchair. "This is insane. She's disabled. That device helps her talk. We're having a birthday party." But the situation had gained its own momentum. More police officers were streaming into the mall. The bomb squad had been called. SWAT was en route. The administrative machinery of emergency response doesn't easily reverse itself, especially when faced with what appeared to be confirmation of the original threat report. Mall Security Director Peterson's voice crackled over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need everyone to evacuate the food court area immediately. Please leave your belongings and move toward the nearest exits in an orderly fashion." The announcement triggered instant panic. Shoppers who had been casually observing the police activity suddenly realized they were in potential danger. Chairs scraped against tile floors as people stood abruptly. Children began crying. Parents grabbed their kids and started moving toward exits. But orderly fashion was a fantasy. Within 30 seconds, the evacuation became a stampede. People pushed and shoved toward the exits, driven by primal fear and the urgent need to escape whatever threat had prompted the police response. The narrow corridor leading from the food court to the main mall became a bottleneck where panic intensified. An elderly woman stumbled and fell near the Chinese restaurant. A businessman stepped on her hand in his rush to escape, not even noticing her cry of pain. A mother lost her grip on her toddler's hand in the crush and began screaming desperately, "Sarah, Sarah, where's my daughter?" The stampede fed on itself, growing more chaotic with each passing second. People who didn't know why they were running simply followed the crowd, their fear amplified by the collective hysteria. Shopping bags were abandoned. Purses dropped and kicked across the floor. A glass display case near the jewelry store shattered as someone was pushed into it. Emma sat trapped in the center of the chaos, her wheelchair surrounded by police officers, while hundreds of people fled in terror around her. The birthday cake had been knocked to the floor during the initial police approach. Purple frosting mixed with scattered paper plates and crushed decorations. Her communication device beeped softly as she tried to type a message explaining the situation. But the sound that had been cheerful and helpful moments before now seemed ominous in the tense atmosphere. Every beep made the officers more nervous, their hands moving closer to their weapons. "Turn off that device right now," Officer Chen commanded. But Emma couldn't explain that turning off her communication device would leave her completely voiceless. Her tears flowed freely as she looked desperately at Mia and Josh, who were being held back by additional officers who had arrived as backup. The bomb squad's arrival turned the situation into a full-scale emergency response. 5 heavily armored technicians entered the mall with specialized equipment designed to deal with explosive devices. Their presence confirmed for fleeing shoppers that the threat was real and immediate. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, the bomb squad commander, assessed the scene with professional detachment. A disabled teenager with an electronic device that could potentially be an IED. 2 accomplices showing protective behavior. A 911 caller who had reported suspicious timer-like sounds and threatening gestures. Protocol demanded they treat the device as a potential explosive until proven otherwise. The wheelchair-mounted communication tablet, with its various cables and electronic components, could conceivably hide dangerous materials. The regular beeping pattern matched what an amateur bomb maker might create. "We need a wider perimeter," Lieutenant Martinez announced. "Clear the entire food court. Get those kids separated and processed. I want to examine that device." The separation was traumatic for all 3 teenagers. Emma watched helplessly as her best friends were escorted away by police officers. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone in a crisis situation, unable to communicate her terror and confusion to the armed strangers surrounding her. Mia fought against the officer holding her arm. "You don't understand. She needs that device to talk. She has cerebral palsy. This is her birthday party." "We'll sort everything out at the station," the officer replied with practiced calm. "Right now, we need to secure the scene." Meanwhile, Karen Whitfield had positioned herself at what she considered a safe distance, near the mall's main entrance, where she could observe the emergency response she had triggered. Her phone was ready to record video footage that she planned to share on social media, positioning herself as the heroic citizen who had prevented a terrorist attack. She watched with satisfaction as SWAT vehicles arrived in the parking lot. Local news vans were already setting up, having monitored police radio frequencies and recognized the significance of a potential mall bombing. Karen imagined herself being interviewed as the quick-thinking witness who had saved hundreds of lives. The bomb squad's examination of Emma's communication device took 45 minutes. Lieutenant Martinez and her team used specialized scanners and X-ray equipment to analyze every component. They found exactly what any reasonable person would expect: a sophisticated but entirely normal assistive technology device designed to help disabled individuals communicate. But by then, the damage was done. The mall evacuation had injured 17 people, An elderly man had suffered a heart attack during the stampede and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. A pregnant woman had been knocked down and was being monitored for potential complications. Children had been separated from parents in the chaos, creating hours of tearful reunions. The media coverage had already begun. Local news stations ran breaking news alerts about a prevented terrorist attack at Westfield Shopping Center. Social media exploded with eyewitness accounts, cell phone videos, and wild speculation about the suspects and their motives. Emma, Mia, and Josh were held for questioning at the police station while their parents were contacted. Emma's mother, Maria Rodriguez, received the phone call that every parent dreads. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Detective Williams with Metro Police. Your daughter is safe, but she's been detained in connection with a bomb threat investigation." The words made no sense to Maria. Her daughter was at a birthday party at the mall. Emma was an honor student, a volunteer at the local animal shelter, a girl whose biggest rebellion was staying up late reading young adult novels. The idea of her being connected to terrorism was so absurd, it bordered on comedy, except nobody was laughing. Within 2 hours, the story had reached social media, where it mutated and grew like a virus. Emma's photo, taken from her school's website, was shared thousands of times alongside speculation about teenage terrorism and the radicalization of disabled youth. The hashtag #JockerMallBomber began trending locally. Anonymous keyboard warriors who had never met Emma posted detailed theories about her motives and methods. Some claimed her disability was a cover story designed to gain sympathy and avoid detection. Others suggested her communication device was sophisticated terrorist technology disguised as assistive equipment. The truth that a 15-year-old girl with cerebral palsy had been celebrating her birthday with cake and friends seemed less interesting than the elaborate conspiracy theories taking shape online. But while social media spun wild tales, Mall Security Director James Peterson was conducting his own investigation. Something about the incident bothered him. The 911 caller's description had been detailed and specific, but the actual scene hadn't matched the threatening situation she had reported. Peterson had spent his entire career learning to distinguish between genuine threats and false alarms. This situation had all the hallmarks of a misunderstanding or deliberate deception. He began reviewing security footage from the hours leading up to the evacuation. The mall's security system included 48 cameras with high-definition recording capability. Peterson could track the entire incident from multiple angles, starting from when Emma and her friends had arrived and set up their birthday celebration. What he saw in the footage made his blood run cold. The 3 teenagers had behaved exactly as they had claimed, celebrating a birthday with cake, decorations, and normal teenage conversation. Emma's communication device had been used for exactly what her friends said, talking to her companions and participating in birthday festivities. But, more importantly, Peterson could see Karen Whitfield's behavior throughout the incident. The cameras clearly showed her growing agitation as she watched the birthday party. They captured her deliberately moving closer to eavesdrop on the teenagers' conversation. Most damning of all, they recorded her facial expressions and body language during her 911 call. Karen had not appeared frightened or concerned for public safety. Instead, she had looked satisfied, almost pleased, as she reported what she claimed was a bomb threat. Her demeanor suggested someone creating a crisis rather than someone responding to one. Peterson immediately contacted Detective Williams, who was still processing the 3 teenagers downtown. "Detective, I think you need to see this security footage before you go any further with those kids." The revelation hit the police investigation like a bomb itself. Detective Williams reviewed the footage with growing anger and disbelief. Here was clear evidence that the 911 caller had fabricated the entire threat. The disabled girl and her friends were obvious victims of a malicious false report. But the machinery of crisis response had already done its damage. Emma had spent 4 hours in police custody, traumatized and unable to fully communicate her distress without her confiscated device. Mia and Josh had been separated from their friend and subjected to aggressive questioning about their non-existent terrorist connections. The media coverage had branded Emma as a suspected terrorist in the public consciousness. Her photo was now associated with bomb threats and mall evacuations in thousands of social media posts and news articles. The damage to her reputation and emotional well-being was incalculable. Detective Williams personally drove Emma and her friends home that evening, offering apologies that felt inadequate given the magnitude of what had occurred. Emma's mother was waiting on the front porch, her face showing the strain of the most terrifying day of her life. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Rodriguez," Detective Williams said as he helped Emma from the police car. "This should never have happened. We were responding to what we now know was a deliberately false report." Emma's communication device had been returned to her, but she remained silent during the ride home. The trauma of being accused, surrounded by armed police, and separated from her support system had left her in a state of shock that worried everyone who saw her. Maria Rodriguez held her daughter close as they entered their home, but she could feel Emma's body shaking with residual fear and confusion. The birthday celebration that was supposed to create happy memories had instead become a nightmare that would haunt their family for months. Meanwhile, the investigation into Karen Whitfield was just beginning. Detective Williams had obtained a warrant for her phone records and was preparing to interview her about the false 911 report. Making a false emergency report was a felony, but given the scope of the consequences, injuries, trauma, massive emergency response costs, prosecutors were considering much more serious charges. The security footage became the cornerstone of the case against Karen. The video clearly showed her observing the birthday party, becoming agitated by the normal sounds of Emma's communication device, and making a deliberate decision to call 911 with false information. More damaging to Karen's credibility were the audio recordings of her 911 call. When played alongside the security footage of the actual birthday party, the contrast was stark. Her claims of suspicious behavior, threatening gestures, and bomb-like devices were obviously fabricated. The story began to shift in the media as news outlets received copies of the security footage. The narrative changed from "terrorist plot foiled" to "innocent disabled girl falsely accused." Public opinion, which had initially supported the emergency response, began turning against Karen and the system that had allowed such an injustice to occur. Emma's story became a symbol of broader issues about disability, discrimination, police overreaction, and the dangers of false emergency reports. Advocacy groups rallied around her case, demanding accountability and systemic changes to prevent similar incidents. The injured victims of the mall stampede also began seeking justice. The elderly man who had suffered a heart attack filed the first lawsuit, claiming that Karen's false report had directly endangered his life. Other victims followed with their own legal actions, creating a growing pile of civil liability for Karen's actions. 3 weeks after the incident, the district attorney's office announced that Karen Whitfield would be charged with filing a false police report, reckless endangerment, and inciting panic. The charges carried a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison, plus massive financial liability for the emergency response costs and victim compensation. The announcement triggered a new wave of media coverage, this time focused on Karen herself. Reporters dug into her background and discovered a pattern of complaints and confrontations with neighbors, service workers, and anyone she perceived as different from herself. The mall incident wasn't an isolated event, but the culmination of years of increasingly aggressive behavior. Karen's attempts to defend herself only made things worse. In a disastrous television interview, she claimed she had been justified in calling 911 because the electronic device had sounded suspicious. When shown the security footage of the normal birthday party, she doubled down on her accusations. That device was making threatening sounds, she insisted to the stunned interviewer. How was I supposed to know it wasn't dangerous? These people need to understand that their behavior affects others. The interview became a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. Karen's complete lack of remorse or recognition of the harm she had caused infuriated viewers. Online comment sections filled with demands for maximum punishment and expressions of support for Emma. The community response to Emma's case was overwhelmingly positive. A GoFundMe campaign to support her family raised over $50,000 in the first week. Local businesses offered donations and services. The mayor issued a formal apology and announced new training programs for emergency responders about disability awareness. Emma herself slowly began recovering from the trauma with the help of counseling and the massive outpouring of community support. Her 16th birthday party, originally ruined by Karen's false accusations, was re-celebrated at the community center with hundreds of supporters in attendance. The mall where the incident occurred implemented new security protocols and sensitivity training for all staff. They also created a scholarship fund in Emma's name to support disabled students pursuing higher education. Karen's trial became a community event that drew national attention. Disability rights advocates, civil rights organizations, and victims' families packed the courtroom as prosecutors presented their case. The security footage played a central role in the proceedings, providing undeniable evidence of Karen's malicious intent. Her defense attorney tried to argue that Karen had genuinely believed there was a threat, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Judge Patricia Hernandez delivered the sentence with visible emotion. Mrs. Whitfield, your actions on that Saturday afternoon endangered the lives of hundreds of innocent people. You traumatized a disabled child and her family. You wasted massive public resources and undermined public trust in our emergency response system. The court sentences you to 8 years in state prison and full restitution to all victims. The sentence was met with applause from the packed courtroom. Emma, now 17 and much stronger than she had been during the original incident, was present with her family and friends. Her communication device spoke for her as she addressed the court. I forgive Mrs. Whitfield for what she did to me, but I hope my experience will help prevent other disabled people from facing similar discrimination and false accusations. The case established important legal precedents about the consequences of false emergency reports targeting disabled individuals. Several states strengthened their laws regarding malicious 911 calls, and police departments nationwide implemented new training programs about assistive technology and disability awareness. Emma's story also inspired changes in emergency response protocols. Many departments now include disability liaisons and require additional verification before treating assistive devices as potential threats. 3 years after the incident, Emma graduated as valedictorian of her high school class and was accepted to multiple universities with full scholarships. The scholarship fund created in her name had helped dozens of other disabled students pursue their educational dreams. The mall where her birthday party had been so cruelly interrupted now displayed a permanent exhibit about disability awareness and the importance of inclusive communities. The food court table where she had been celebrating was marked with a small plaque recognizing her courage and the community's commitment to protecting all its members. Emma returned to that same food court on her 18th birthday, this time surrounded by hundreds of supporters and advocates who had rallied around her cause. The celebration was peaceful and joyous, exactly as her original party should have been. As she blew out the candles on her cake, her communication device spoke her wish aloud for everyone to hear. "I wish for a world where everyone is judged by their character, not their differences." The crowd erupted in applause, and for a moment, it seemed like her wish might actually come true. The mall that had once been filled with panic and fear was now full of hope and solidarity. The food court that had witnessed such injustice had become a symbol of community healing and strength. Karen Whitfield remained in prison, serving her sentence and paying restitution to the victims of her false accusations. Her legacy was one of hatred and deception, a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice and malicious intent. But Emma's legacy was entirely different. She had transformed a moment of cruel victimization into a movement for positive change. Her courage in facing false accusations had inspired new laws, better training, and increased awareness about disability rights. The birthday party that had been destroyed by one woman's malice had ultimately become the foundation for a more just and inclusive community. The candles that had been extinguished by panic and hatred were now replaced by the bright flame of hope and determination. As Emma and her friends left the mall that evening, her communication device beeped softly with messages of support from around the world. The sound that had once been twisted into evidence of terrorism was now recognized for what it had always been: the voice of a young woman determined to be heard, understood, and accepted for exactly who she was. The mall's evening lights reflected off her wheelchair as she moved through the parking lot, surrounded by family and friends. Behind her, the building that had once been a place of terror and injustice stood as a monument to the power of truth, community solidarity, and the unbreakable spirit of a teenager who refused to let hatred define her story. Emma Rodriguez had wanted nothing more than to celebrate her birthday with friends and cake. What she got instead was something far more significant: the chance to change the world for the better, one beep at a time.